The earliest Pokemon you encounter in a playthrough are usually weak and just end up as bodies to fill out your party with. However, some of these early game Pokemon can be deceptively powerful. So today I'm covering what I believe to be the best first Pokemon to catch in every mainline Pokemon game, based on how well that Pokemon matches up against the early game and beyond. The only rule is that the Pokemon must be obtainable before beating the first gym. We begin with red, blue, and yellow, and the main priority is finding something that will help against Brock. Sure, he's a pushover with Bulbasaur or Squirtle, but with Charmander or Pikachu, you'll want or need help. While you can find long-term useful Pokemon early, such as Nidoran male for an eventual Nidoking, or Spearow for an eventual Fearow, you can find those Pokemon again later, and don't really need them now since they're bad against Brock. Nidoran does get Double Kick at a low level in yellow, but it's not stab, and Onix's defense is through the roof. It's literally base 160, the second highest in all of Gen 1, and still in the top 15 to this day. Yellow version does have Mankey on Route 22, which gives you a stab fighting move for the rock-type fight, but again, Onix's defense is insane. But on the flip side, its base special stat, special attack and special defense were just one stat in Gen 1, is only 30, tied for the 9th worst in Gen 1 alongside Sandshrew, Rhyhorn, and Brock's other Pokemon, Geodude. So all you really need to beat Brock is a strong special move that is not resisted. And there is one non-starter Pokemon that can give you that. The best first Pokemon to catch is Caterpie or Metapod. Not for them, but for Butterfree. Metapod evolves into Butterfree at the low level of 10. That Butterfree will then get Confusion, a 50 power special move, at level 10 or 12 depending on the game. And Butterfree's special stat is 80, almost triple Onix's. You also might confuse the Onix, potentially making it hurt itself instead of attacking, or have Brock waste a turn using a full heal. Now you may be thinking, wait, hold on, Butterfree is just gonna die instantly. It is 4 times weak to rock. And in other generations, you would be right. But in Gen 1, Brock's Pokemon do not know any rock moves. Beyond that, Butterfree is unlikely to stick around on your final team, but in the interim, its various status powders can come in handy, especially Sleep Powder. In Gen 1, Sleep could last up to a horrifying 7 turns, and the Pokemon didn't even get to act on the turn it woke up. Use it to beat Brock, then as an anesthesiologist for a while. Sounds pretty good to me. Next is Gold, Silver, and Crystal. These games have the lowest level gym leader in all of Pokemon, with Falkner's Ace being just a level 9. So as you might imagine, there aren't that many options. However, there is still a clear winner. That Pokemon is Bellsprout, found pretty easily in the routes neighboring the city. This might confuse you at first, since grass is not particularly helpful against the flying and bug gyms, the first 2. But you're not using the Bellsprout. A man in Violet City will trade your Bellsprout for an Onix named Rocky, giving you one of the strongest Pokemon possible this early in the game. It won't have a rock move until level 14 and is technically weak to Falkner's Mudslaps, but remember, insane defense. It is a stone wall that they will struggle to kill. Plus it starts out knowing Screech, a useful defense dropping move to make up for its low attack. Beyond Falkner, it'll have a rock move for Bugsy's Bugs, and crucially, while Whitney's Miltank can unfortunately attract it, Onix still resists all of her moves. Rocky is not good enough to remain on your team as just an Onix, but if you go through the unfortunate annoyances of getting a Metal Coat off a Wild Magnemite, trade evolving it, and using the Iron Tail and Earthquake TMs to give it good moves, you'll have a very strong Steelix, which is absolutely an endgame worthy Pokemon. In Gen 2, it has 10 resistances, 2 immunities, and 4 weaknesses. But half of those weaknesses are always physical, and thus have to contend with its massive defense. And remember, it's a traded Pokemon. The whole time, it's getting boosted experience. Rocky the Onix is absolutely your best first catch in Generation 2. Okay, I guess Bellsprout technically is the first catch, but like, you're using the Onix, they're gonna share the trophy. Side note, if you're wondering why I did not discuss Mareep, Gen 2 actually blocks your path to Mareep's grass on Route 32 until after you beat the first gym. Next is Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. This choice is quite tricky because several of the front runners overlap their typings with starters. This does not disqualify them, but it is a factor I have to consider. For example, I think Shroomish is great. Its grass type can help with Roxanne, Effect Spore can get you out of a bind, and it gets Leech Seed, an incredible move very early. But of course it overlaps with Trico, and eventually Blaziken with fighting as Breloom. Ruby and Sapphire, but not Emerald, have an in-game trade in Rustboro for Makit the Makuhita if you trade over a Slackoth. I think Hariyama is an excellent Hoenn playthrough Pokemon with its massive bulk, huge attack, and low evolution level. And getting one with boosted experience that you can use for Roxanne, Norman, Sydney, Glacia, and Steven is huge. Makit is also guaranteed Guts, a much better ability for Hariyama than Thick Fat. However, the fighting type obviously overlaps with Combuskin and Blaziken. Finally, there's two psychic types to consider, Ralts and Abra. Gardevoir is a staple of many Hoenn teams, and Route 102 is the only place to get Ralts. I do personally think Alakazam is a bit better though, but Abra is only available before the first gym in Emerald, found on Route 116. It's a tough call for sure, but I think despite the Blaziken overlap, I have to say that Slackoth is the best to catch, so you can trade it for Makit the Makuhita. Hariyama is simply fantastic, and even if you pick Torchic, having it on your team for the Norman battle will be huge, since you'll still only have Combuskin at that point. Also, Blaziken cannot learn Belly Drum, which is one of my favorite moves. Belly Drum maxes your attack stat to +6 in exchange for having HP, and if you just potion it back up, Hariyama can now sweep most anything. That's just in Ruby and Sapphire though. In Emerald, my choice is Abra, so you have a strong, fast psychic type for the sometimes challenging Brawly battle. I chose it over Ralts because you can have Kadabra with base 120 special attack and 105 speed at just level 16. Ralts doesn't evolve to Kirlia until level 20, and Kirlia's base stat total is only 278. Next is Fire Red and Leaf Green. And while my priority is the same, ensuring you have a way to beat Brock even if you choose Charmander, my choice is not the same. That is because Onix actually has a rock move now, and it will hit Butterfree so hard that it might actually squash it. However, while Butterfree was nerfed, the runner-up was actually buffed to the point of being the new winner. That Pokemon is Mankey. Mankey is found on Route 22 still, and now resists the rock move that Onix will use. But more importantly, the fighting move it has is Low Kick. This is the same as before, but in Gen 1, Low Kick was a 50 power move with 90% accuracy and a 30% chance to flinch. Not awful, but not stellar against a massive defense Onix. But starting in Gen 3, Low Kick's power changes based on the target's weight. Onix weighs 463 pounds, which means Low Kick is 120 base power against it. That is an insanely strong move with no drawbacks. Primeape is not great long term, there's no Rage Fist Annihilate, and fighting isn't that great in Kanto anyways, but if you need help getting past the Rock Snake wall, then Low Kick Mankey is a great way to do that. Also, I should note that while in a previous video I named Nidoking the best Fire Red Leaf Green team member and Nidoran Male does learn Double Kick, you cannot get it before Brock like you could in Gen 1. So it was never a contestant for Gen 3 in this video. Next is Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. And this is the easiest choice so far. Most Pokemon games feature an early route normal type, an early route bug, and a regional bird. Prior to Sinnoh, all of those were underwhelming at best, at least in the long term. Then Sinnoh added Starly. Starly is found on the literal first route of the game and evolves at the pleasantly low level of just 14. As Staravia, it gets Intimidate, one of the best abilities in the game. Then it becomes Staraptor with base 100 speed and 120 attack, and access to the incredible move Close Combat. Even without Stab, this move is so strong on such a strong Pokemon that you can get away with not even having a fighting type on your team. With the combo of Flying Offense and Close Combat, your little Starly can go on to excel in the Grass Gym, Fighting Gym, Steel Gym, Ice Gym, and Bug Elite 4. Plus, you need a flyer on your team anyways. This is still the era of HMs, and not having access to fly at all times is super annoying. And Staraptor is one of the best flyers ever made. If you're not using Staraptor in Sinnoh, you're either doing something wrong or are choosing not to for variety or a challenge. It's the best team member outside your starter, and it just happens to be found on the first route of the game. Next is Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and there's been a big change from Gen 2. Mareep is now obtainable before Falkner. This gives you an electric type for the Flying Gym and Bugsy's Scyther. Onyx got some buffs too though. It now gets Rock Throw sooner, and Steelix doesn't need a TM for Iron Tail. Both are really useful and worthy team members, but I'm gonna keep Rocky the Onyx, or for getting technical, the Bellsprout you need to trade for it, as the winner. Assuming you're willing to get a Metal Coat from a Wild Magnemite and then trade evolve it. I know it's very annoying, but I will deal with annoyances for power.
By the way, if you're playing any of these games on a modern day emulator, you can get rid of trait evolutions with a feature of the universal randomizer.
Anyways, while the Mareep line is good against Gym 1 and 2, it's hit much harder by Miltank. Meanwhile, Onyx is a really strong wall against all of the first 3 gyms, and will have stab super effective damage for the first 2. And then Steelix is just simply so powerful, extremely strong, and hard to kill. Also, again, Rocky is an in-game trade. Boosted experience is a pretty big deal. Haha, it is I, Grunty Boy, and it is back to school season, which means... The nightmares about my teeth falling out at prom get worse. What? No, Jesus. It means you can get a discount on Raycon's Everyday Earbuds Classic, the sponsor of today's video. 32 hours of battery life with the case, a quick charge function that gives you 90 minutes of usage with just 10 minutes of charge, and active noise cancellation, perfect for getting into the zone while studying. I also like the option to switch to awareness mode, so if I'm out somewhere like on a walk where I need to be aware of my surroundings, I can be. Overall, they sound so good and are just so straightforward and easy. I use mine literally every day. Ooh, and have you seen the new colors? I normally go for black everything, but I'm thinking about trying out cool mint. You know, change up my style for the new school year. School year? Grunty Boy, you're 30. I'm getting a master's degree. In crime. You mean criminal justice? Nope. Just crime. Click the link in the description below or go to buyraycon.com/MandJTV to get 20% off site-wide. That's buyraycon.com/MandJTV. Well, good luck on your master's degree. Why, thank you. And good luck with your teeth nightmares. Keep going to therapy too. Ta-ta! Next is Black and White. No other Pokemon game has fewer pre-Gym 1 Pokemon. It's actually insane. There are so few that I will name all of them right now. You can get your starter, Patrat, Lillipup, Purloin, and the Elemental Monkey, weak to your starter, but strong against the gym. That's it. That's the whole list. You cannot make a full team of 6 Pokemon without doubling up on species. This is especially brutal considering that the Striaton Gym will always be strong against your starter. Therefore, the best first Pokemon to catch is whichever monkey you get. You don't technically catch it, it's a gift, but like, catch can be a synonym for obtain. Pansage, Pansear, and Panpour are the winners for the sole reason that they can help you just get past the first gym and start building an actual team. I do not care if you never use them again, just monkey your way out of this early game prison. Black 2 and White 2 provide significantly more options, but unfortunately none of them really impress me. Riolu is found in Flockacy Ranch, and thanks to its fighting type, it is seemingly strong against the first gym, which is normal. Steel Fighting Lucario is certainly very useful once you can get it evolved. However, for Riolu to get a fighting move, you have to out-level the first gym, so it's only somewhat helpful, and then you have 2 back-to-back gyms that resist fighting. Plus, it overlaps with Pignite. Mareep is a solid electric type, but you don't need electric for the first gym, and the Verbank complex right after has Magnemite, which I think is better. I'm not thrilled about it, but my pick is Riolu. It will be a good team member for 2 of the starters, and still a solid one if you pick Tepig, since despite their overlap in fighting, Lucario and Emboar's only weakness overlap is ground. The friendship evolution could be annoying, but leveling up is the most effective friendship booster, so catching Riolu at such a low level should speed up that process. Next is X and Y, and a runner-up I want to mention is Bunnelby to do a trade in Santaloon for a Farfetch'd named Quacklin. That's fantastic. Quacklin will dog walk the first gym, the bug gym, but its usefulness falls off pretty quickly after that. Farfetch'd is, after all, a very terrible Pokemon. My pick for the winner is actually Riolu again. It's found on Route 22, just east of Santaloon City, and while it won't be any help in the first gym, you can begin the process of boosting its friendship at level 6 or 7. Grant, the rock leader, isn't until level 25, so you might have a steel-fighting Lucario for the second gym. And then, of course, Mega Lucario. I won't go into too much detail about this. I discussed it in my best gift Pokemon in every game video, so you can just watch that. But in short, Mega Lucario is the most broken playthrough Pokemon ever. Its stats and typing and ability simply destroy everything it comes up against. Now you could of course just use the gift Lucario that Karina gives you, but if you catch Riolu early, you can use it for Grant. Additionally, while Lucario overlaps with Chestnut's fighting type, you won't have a Chestnut for Grant. And in their final forms, they only share a weakness to fire. Next is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Gardevoir is better now thanks to Fairy, but the types that Fairy is good against that are not already weak to Psychic, those being Dark and Dragon, are not until the League. Additionally, Abra is after the first gym again, so it cannot win like it did in Emerald. Therefore, my winner is the same as Ruby and Sapphire. Slackoth, so you can trade it for Machit the Makuhita, which was actually buffed. Gen 3 Machit had poor IVs and a neutral nature, but Gen 6 Machit has a perfect attack IV and an attack boosting nature. Also, Hariyama now gets Belly Drum at only level 26. Even if you plan to move on from it once you have Blaziken, this boosted experience Hariyama is simply too good. Also, quick tangent before we move on to the next game, I discovered something while writing this section that I absolutely must tell you about. In every game since the move was introduced, Hariyama has Brine as a level 1 move. This confused me when I saw it because Brine is a special water attack, and every other Pokemon that learns it is water type, at least partially aquatic, or Mew, which learns all TM moves. So why does Hariyama get it in its level up Sweat? It's Sweat. Sweat is salt water, and thus brine. Hariyama sweats so much that it can literally damage foes with it. That is as funny as it is disgusting. Next is Sun and Moon, which of course do not have gyms, so instead I'm looking at Pokemon obtainable before the first major battle, the Totem Gumshoos or Alolan Raticate. There are a lot of options, but I don't really think any of them are exceptional. Some are good for the Totem, but not for Hala, or vice versa, and others are solid Pokemon, but overlap with starters and don't really shine until later. Therefore, I think the best Pokemon is one that is all around good, doesn't overlap starters, and has good matchups against both some early game battles and some later ones. And my pick is Pick! Peck. You see what I did there? Picky Peck is another regional bird and thus caught very early, on the first route of the game. And the line is good because it evolves quickly, into Trumbeak at just 14, and to Cannon at just 28. While they are unfortunately quite slow, you can kinda get around that with early access to the Quick Claw, and then you can enjoy their high attack. Toucannon's is 120. They also have a good ability. If you get one with Skill Link, which maxes the number of hits for multi-hit moves, that gives you Stab Fury attack that will be 75 power plus Stab, assuming it doesn't miss, along with 125 power Bullet Seed later, and eventually Rock Blast from the Move Tutor. It also has a surprisingly wide move pool of physical coverage moves. I also selected it because flying's a generally good type in Alola. And everywhere else, go Team Sky! Hala is the immediate good matchup, and you should have Trumbeak by that point, but then it goes on to help with the Grass Trial, Guzma's Bugs, the Totem Kamo-O, and Hala again in the league. Additionally, Toucannon's normal flying typing is defensively good against the Ghost Trial and Hapu's ground types. It's not outrageously amazing, but it's a solid team member that you can get very early. Things are very different in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, though. A bunch of new Pokemon were added, expanding your options even more, but one of them in particular is actually insane. The first Pokemon you should catch is Spearow on Route 2, but just so you can do another in-game trade. I know there's a lot of these in this video, but a lot of them are good. In the Route 2 Pokemon Center, a girl would like a Spearow in exchange for a freaking Hawlucha! Yes! Hawlucha! A Pokemon with a base stat total of 500 before the first fight of the game. And that first battle is weak to fighting. And then the second is weak to flying. Hawlucha can solo the first 2 boss fights of the game. But it goes so much farther than that. Cha, I realize I didn't mention, that is the name of this awesome Hawlucha, has an offensive advantage against the Totem Araquanid, Totem Lurantis, Olivia's Rock types, the Totem Togedemaru, Guzma's Bug types, Nanu's Dark types, the Totem Kameo, the Totem Rabambi, and Malaine and Olivia in the league. It is defensively weak to some of those, like it is weak to Electric and also Rock, but still, that's most of the fights in the game! You can catch Wild Hawlucha on Route 3, but Cha is better because you can use it for the Totem Gumshoe's Eradicate, it gets boosted experience, and it has a perfect attack IV and an attack boosting nature. Cha the Hawlucha is easily the best Pokemon for an Ultra Alola team, and I think it is very weird that this girl wanted to get rid of him. What, for a Spearow? That is a much worse bird. Next is Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which changed the Kanto games a lot more than just adding janky motion controls. For one, you start with either Pikachu or Eevee, but they're much more powerful than normal ones, and they have double kick for Brock. Also, the early game spawns have changed somewhat. This is made apparent by the fact that the gym attendant won't even let you into the gym if you don't have a grass or water type in your party. Yeah, clearly the difficulty is quite a bit lower now. This quest wouldn't actually be possible in the older games unless you started with Bulbasaur or Squirtle. It's also odd that he says grass or water because there are no wild water types before Gym 1. So you need a grass type. This works pretty well though actually, since grass will be useful for both Brock and Misty. But which grass type to pick? Let's Go Pikachu only has Oddish, while Let's Go Eevee only has Bellsprout, but neither of these matter here, because the best option is by far Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur is now found wild in Viridian Forest as a special spawn, meaning it is almost impossible to find without a catch combo, but it spawns quite consistently if you have one at about 11. All right, so I guess it's probably not gonna be the first one you like actually catch, but it's the first one you're gonna use, and that's close enough. Bulbasaur is already considered the best starter in the older Kanto games, so of course it's still a spectacular team member when you can get it just slightly later. It beats Brock, Misty, and Giovanni, both outside and inside his gym, and it's defensively strong against Lieutenant Surge and Erica. Plus, now that Fairy exists, its poison type will be useful for any you run into. As icing on the cake, you'll want an original Kanto starter on your team in general, because after beating Blaine, you get the Mega Stones for Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise, meaning Mega Venusaur for Gym 8 and the League. Next is Sword and Shield, which are, frankly, insane. Let's first address the Caparajah in the room, Dynamax Adventures. I've explained this before, so I'll try to keep it brief. If you have the DLC, you can go to the Crown Tundra, lose the battle to Peony, go to the Max Lair, run through a Dynamax adventure using rental Pokemon, catch a level 70 Suicune, since this feature bypasses the catch level limit, and steamroll the entire game with it. So technically, Suicune would be the best first Pokemon to catch. But what if you don't have the DLC, or you don't want to break the game? Then you have an absurd amount of options. Before the first gym, there's routes 1 through 4, the Slumbering Weld, Galar Mine number 1, and the entire wild area. Okay, not the entire wild area. A lot of the places don't spawn Pokemon weak enough for you to catch without having a gym badge. But like, still the spawns change every day. There are the lasers, like it's so much. All in all, there's like 70 different Pokemon you can get before Gym 1. So how am I possibly going to choose the best one? Well, it's actually quite simple. You see, you just get something that you can get really, really early, That's really good. And is Rookidee. Rookidee can actually be the literal first Pokemon you catch on Route 1, and it is yet another stellar regional bird. Flying is great early, since the first gym is grass, the third has a bug type, and if you're playing sword, the fourth is fighting type. But in addition to this, Rookidee has a strategy that is one of the most impressive that I've ever seen. Rookidee gets Power Trip at just level 4, a dark move that's only 20 power, but gains 20 power for each positive stat boost the user has. It's a physical dark type stored power. This move works great on Pokemon that can boost their own stats, and just 4 levels later, Rookidee gets Hone Claws, boosting its attack and accuracy by 1 stage each. So if you use Hone Claws twice, Power Trip is now 100 power. And since you're at +2 attack, it's effectively 200 power. Only Pokemon that resist Dark can really survive it, and if it's weak to Dark, like Beed's Pokemon are, then you can sweep through him with just 1 Hone Claws. And that's just the early game. Rookidee eventually becomes Corviknight, which gains Steel and ends up with incredible typing. Only weak to Fire and Electric, while having 8 resistances and 2 immunities. If you evolve it before Opal's Gym, it can beat the Fairy Gym, Rock Gym, and Ice Gym while being immune to Raihan's Sandstorm. Plus, it's a Steel type. Even if it's not offensively strong, there's a high chance it's gonna resist all of your opponent's moves. So Rookidee wins without the DLC, Suicune with it. But Rookidee wins no matter what, in my heart. Next is Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, which I'll keep short. It's Starly again. The changes from Gen 4 are so minimal that it doesn't affect my answer. Then we have Legends Arceus. And as I've said before, I don't think the team you use really matters that much. Most of the major combat is dodge, roll, and try not to die. So I'm simply picking a Pokemon to help you get through the early game, that being Buizel. It's the most accessible early water type, and the Noble Kleavor is weak to water. Even if you picked Oshawott, it'll be nice to have a backup. Finally is Scarlet and Violet, where your options are the entire game. It's open world, and the gyms can be done in any order. So, oh God. I'm just kidding. There's actually a pretty straightforward solution to this. I'm just looking at Pokemon in the areas before Mesa Goza, specifically South Province Area 1. This is before you can ride Koraidon or Miraidon, and it's a true tutorial area. While some of the Pokemon here will be strong eventually, most are pretty weak to start out, like Azurill or Igglybuff or Wooper. But there is one Pokemon that is outrageously powerful from the very beginning. Flamigo. Flamigo has a base stat total of 500 with a base speed of 90 and a base attack of 115. And you can get it as low as level 4. By level 12, it'll have stab moves for both of its types, and like we saw with Hawlucha, flying and fighting just so happens to be an amazing offensive combo. If you didn't notice, most of the Pokemon I've selected in this video have been flying type, fighting type, or both. Together, fighting and flying beat the first 2 gyms, 2 of the first 3 Titans, and the first Team Star Camp. Flamigo bodies the early game with fully evolved stats, while most Pokemon won't be anywhere close to that. And after that, it excels in the normal gym, both ground Titans, since Great Tusk is weak to flying and Iron Treads is weak to fighting, the Ice Gym, and the Fighting Team Star Camp. If you get one with Scrappy, it can even help in the Ghost Gym. And yes, it does eventually overlap with Quaquaval, but Quaxley doesn't get fighting until its final form. Even if you pick Quaxley and ditch Flamigo later, Flamigo is so fantastic in the early game that passing it up would be a mistake. Thanks so much for watching. If you watched all the way through, then consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you want to see another similar video of mine, check out my video where I figured out the best pseudo-legendary Pokemon to use on your team in every mainline Pokemon game.